I've done it. I'm doing it. I've brought my mother onto my podcast. My mom, Ellen Friedman, is this week's guest on the Alter Your Health podcast, which is still and will always be your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our precious planet. And I'm Dr. Benjamin Alter. For those of you who haven't yet met me, it's really nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. We've got a treat. Like I said, I've got my mother on my podcast, and my mom is a special woman. I think all mothers are special people, of course. Every person is a special person, and mothers, parents, children, those sort of relationships are always so rich and valuable and meaningful. And that is certainly the case with me and my relationship with my mother. Honestly, it was a big stretch for me to even invite her on my podcast. I love my mother dearly, as we all do. And that being said, the relationship that I have with my mother is a struggle at times. We are so close, but in a way that often creates a little bit of tension. And that being said, I feel like this conversation was a big step. Not to say that we don't have deep conversations at all in our life when the cameras aren't rolling, when the audio isn't recording, but having that sort of openness and vulnerability and sharing this with the world, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, it symbolizes a big step forward in my relationship with my mother. So Mom, I love you. I know that you're listening to this. You're listening to this episode just like you've listened to all of the episodes in the past. My mother is my biggest fan, and I love you and I appreciate you, Mom. And the conversation that we had will be super valuable, I know, to so many listeners because my mom is doing incredible work. And it's really interesting because my mom and I have had so many parallels in our life. We have so many similar interests. So many people just assume that my mom is always influencing me. But honestly, I feel like we are living independent yet very parallel at times lives. For example, my mom was very focused on physical therapy. That has been her career. That was her career rather for 30 plus years. But in the last 10 to 15 years, she has transitioned and evolved into more mind, body, and soul work, working as a spiritual life sort of coach person. And me, similarly, I've been hyper-focused on physical health, physical well-being, and events and sort of things in my life have shifted my focus towards mind, body, soul work. So, we are both on this kind of soul journey. We are all on this soul journey, every one of us. And my soul journey is very parallel with my mother's, and that makes it really special. Another thing that's interesting about our relationship is, food is something that I am super passionate about. You guys know that. And my mom is also evolving her nutritional journey in a way that I think that I am having some influence on her food choices and decisions, and we get into that a little bit at the end as she has evolved in the last couple of years into a whole food plant-based diet, and she shares about her healing that has come from that nutritional change, as well as a change in mindset and understanding of how the mind works, how the body works, the connection of the mind and the body. And she shares that understanding with her patients and clients in the world. And I know that my mom will be on for another conversation on this podcast because as we wrap this conversation up, we realize we hardly scratched the surface in terms of what she is offering the world and the deep work that she does with individuals and groups. Anyways, you can find so much more information about my mother, Ellen Friedman, at www.healinghousecalls.com. She does a monthly webinar, which is super cool, and you can find out more information there on her website maybe, or you can probably search her on Facebook and find her on Facebook and connect with her there. That might be better. Maybe she'll accept your friend request. Anyways, before we dive in, I just want to remind people real quick, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and rate and review this podcast. Let me know what you think. Let me know how this information is landing. And also, it means so much to me if you would share this with a friend, a family member, a loved one of some sort, someone who would benefit from connecting with this sort of high vibrational, healthy information. It's all about spreading love, spreading health, spreading positivity. So thanks for being a part of that. And also, I want to remind people who haven't learned about this offering yet, the Alter Health Medicinal Living online 6-week transformational self-paced course. That's a mouthful, and honestly, I just made up that mouthful in this moment. But it is all of those things, a 6-week course that is online and self-paced. And this course is designed to take you into your health, guiding you through all of the most important elements of a healing diet and lifestyle, supporting you with simple and direct guided action steps all along the way. So if you want to learn more about this course, go to www.alter.health/course. And listeners of this podcast get 20% off because I love you and I want to see you thriving in this world. So use the code ALTERYOURHEALTH when you check out with the Medicinal Living 6-week course. And if you would like any more information about the course or anything else for that matter, check out www.alter.health. Anyways, that's enough of that. Let's dive into this deep and touching conversation. I'm so grateful that my mom was passing through Carbondale, my new hometown in Colorado, and we sat down in person, face to face, cameras rolling, audio recording, and we got into some good stuff. So hope you enjoy this conversation with my mother, Ellen Friedman. Hey, Mom.
Hey, Benjamin.
Welcome to the podcast.
It's so amazing to be here.
I think that you have probably listened to most of the episodes and probably more than any other human. You're probably my biggest fan, and thank you for your support and your feedback and your guidance along my life journey so far. And I'm excited and a little bit nervous to sit down for an hour and talk about your journey and what it is that you do. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, as I was thinking about being here and sitting with you this morning, I was aware that there's lots of pieces that you know and you've heard multiple times over and over, and there's probably lots of pieces that might be new.
How did you get into physical therapy?
I wanted to find something where I wasn't a doctor and I wasn't a nurse. Like, I knew I didn't want those professions, but there was something in healthcare that kind of called me.
What was wrong with a doctor or a nurse?
Oh, there was just nothing appealing. It wasn't anything wrong with it. It just wasn't appealing for me. I didn't want to put in the hours for medical school, and that just felt like a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility. And I just didn't have an interest in really becoming a physician. And a nurse also just didn't really appeal to me. And when I think about it, I really even wasn't exposed to physical therapy knowingly. It just kind of came up when I was in college, and I took a couple years off after my first 2 years of college, not knowing what I wanted to do. And then sometime later on, I had like a flashback of my grandfather who worked, he was a dentist, but he had an office in a hospital because he had invented maxillofacial prosthetics. And we were walking to his office, and he walked me through the physical therapy department. And I just remember having this feeling like I didn't even know what it was that I was in a physical therapy department. I was really young, but it was just, I had this feeling of inner calling.
Did you ever have any experience with a physical therapist?
No, never. I never had an experience with a physical therapist. I never had a family member who had experience with a physical therapist.
So you took a couple of years off of school, and then when you started back in school, you had a new focus.
Well, I took a couple of years off and worked as a physical therapy technician at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla, California. after my parents had moved there. And then I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And really funny, I thought I was going to PT school in order to learn how to save people from having back pain.
Was that your experience as a technician?
We did a lot. We had like the back program, and we were doing a lot of education. And I really liked the educational part of physical therapy, educating patients on taking better care of themselves. But then I graduated PT school, and the orthopedic world was filled with workers' compensation patients that I was seeing, and there was a real low motivation for getting better. So kind of lowered my motivation to work with them. And also in my physical therapy training, I just had an inner calling to work with people with chronic neurologic conditions.
Where did that inner calling come from? When was your first experience with a neurologic patient?
Well, I had one of my college roommates had progressive MS and was literally bedbound within 2 years. And
at U of A?
At U of A, yeah, University of Arizona. And so that was interest. And then I didn't get the internship that I really wanted when I was in physical therapy school. It was like right across the street from where I was living, and it was like the rehab center of New Jersey. It was like the best place where I could have learned, and I didn't get that, and I ended up working at a hospital where every single patient in the hospital had multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an inpatient hospital. So I felt like I learned a lot about MS, but what I really learned was a lot about people in that internship.
I can't imagine a hospital where everyone had MS. I mean, I know that MS...
It was a rehab hospital.
Right. And I know that MS presents itself differently in everybody. And was that really apparent when you were
Yeah,
in that,
yeah, there were people that had symptoms like they were quadriplegic or paraplegic or hemiplegic and all different sorts of things. But what was really interesting, this was before there were even disease-modifying agents. Mm-hmm. So people were just rehabbing from having a massive exacerbation, and the goal was just to get them, see how close they could get to where they were before they had their exacerbation, because there was no understanding that people could even get better.
So they weren't on any sort of pharmaceuticals to manage their symptoms.
I believe the pharmaceuticals they were on were steroids.
Yeah, just steroids, and then
heavy steroids.
And then you were helping them just manage physically.
Yeah, our role was to get them physically back to functioning like they were as close to before their exacerbation. But the idea was that they never really even got back there because the exacerbation caused damage.
You just, try to slow the progression as much as possible.
Well, I think later I learned that there were things that I could do to help people slow the progression, for sure. But at that time, it was just how much more functional can we get people? How much more independent can we get them? Whether it was from a wheelchair level or walking. Yeah.
And did most MS patients at that time understand that they had some progressive?
Everyone knew. I mean, the patients knew, the doctors knew, the nurses. We all knew that people just got worse. Mm-hmm. And then when I graduated PT school, no one wanted to work with someone that got worse. But I had a different understanding because I saw so many different people in that internship and so many different ways that MS presented. And I also knew that right out of PT school, I didn't tell this story for decades because I was embarrassed about it, but right out of PT school, I knew that there was something more than the tools and techniques I had learned as a physical therapist. I knew that there was a lot more about the way I was connecting with people and what I was seeing in them that was helping their progress and success more than, or I don't want to say more than, but at that time, in addition to the techniques and tools that I had learned in PT school.
After working with so many patients, is there anything that people had in common who did better off physically than those who tended to progress more rapidly, or?
That's a great question. I'm kind of broadening out to all the neuro rehab patients that I worked with.
Yeah, because you started in this MS hospital, but then I know that you worked with a lot of people who were recovering from strokes and brain injuries. And...
Yeah, a lot of brain injury, Parkinson's. My second job as a physical therapist was at a brain injury rehab facility that was started by patients and families.
Is this in Phoenix?
This was in Phoenix, Arizona, yeah. It was called Hope Center for Head Injury. Unfortunately, it's no longer exists, but it was a nonprofit organization. And we would just do anything and everything we could for our patients. And I had no equipment. So I went from like a hospital with all this high-tech equipment to having a room with a mat table and no equipment. And I literally used like oranges from the tree for balance and coordination, and having people hold the orange or throw the orange, and using parking blocks in the parking lot for balance training. And there I saw and heard people getting better for reasons beyond anything I'd learned in physical therapy school. So I think I just ended up having this, like, I don't know
what's helping people,
what's
holding people back.
Yeah. Other than their inner drive.
Yeah, that's kind of was my question. Did you notice any sort of real intentional, strong intentions that people had to heal? And then maybe on the other side of things, were there people who were just like, oh, this is just, kind of lower energy around their diagnosis and disease progression? Or?
I'm chuckling because you're asking me about people's intentions before I knew what intentions
was.
But it was hard with people with MS in those early days because it didn't seem realistic or possible to have an intention for improvement. Later I saw lots of people get significantly better. And that seemed like miraculous to me.
So what happened later that allowed you to see and witness people recover more than in your early years as a physical therapist?
I saw miracles.
But what allowed that? Was it something in you that saw things differently, or were things actually different?
Things were, I don't know. I don't know. It was probably a combination, but the first person was someone who couldn't work because of fatigue. And I just thought fatigue was part of something with MS. There was nothing you could do for it. Doctors gave people medication, and even with the medication, they didn't really, maybe helped a little, but they really didn't get better. And I had 8 sessions twice a week for 4 weeks with this woman, and her name's Barbara. And she, at the 8th session, she said to me, we were kind of reviewing, we're going to be discharging, what have you learned, what questions do you have? And she said, everything's fine, except for when I started seeing you, I would wake up at 8 in the morning, I'd take a nap from 12 to 2, and then I'd be good to go till I went to bed at 8 p.m. And now, it was January, so it got dark at 5 o'clock. She goes, now I'm taking my nap at 5 o'clock, and I'm waking up at like 6 or 6:30, and it's dark out, and I'm like disoriented about whether it's morning or night. And I just broke into tears. Like, her energy level went from 4 hours of requiring a nap until 8 hours. Like, that was, prior to that moment, it was impossible. And I thought, so I said to her, well, can I call you in a couple of weeks and just see how you're doing? Because I was like, there's no way this can last. I don't know what's going on. There's nothing going to last. And a lot of the treatment that I did with her was relaxation exercises and downregulating her nervous system. But I didn't know the long-term impact until I checked with her every 6 months for 5.5 years. And she not only maintained, but grew her endurance. And then I was like, well, I'll just share this with other people. And I began sharing it with people, whether...
Sharing this? What do you mean
sharing,
this? What's this that you shared? Yeah, what was the magic ingredient in that case that you began sharing from that point
I think just
onward?
eliciting the relaxation response, the healing, now that I now see as the healing response of the body. And then people would say like they forgot their provigil, which was their energy, the medicine that gave them energy. They just, and then the next person, she said that banding pain that she had like around her trunk, which I never did anything with because nothing ever helped. No one ever got better from relief of that banding pain. She's like, that banding pain is gone. I've had MS for 25 years and that banding pain is gone. I'm like, how can that banding pain be gone?
So
But
how long ago was this? When was this in your physical therapy career that you learned about down regulating the nervous system?
those are difficult questions for me, but
I mean,
10 to 15 years ago.
so toward the end of your
Yeah.
physical therapy career, because now you're not
Yeah.
really in the role of a physical therapist.
Do you know how that came to be?
What?
How I can switch from coaching to from physical therapy to coaching?
Well, yeah, I've heard you share
Oh.
the story before, but yeah, tell me again how. So yeah, I know that you went to the University of Santa Monica and studied spiritual psychology as a physical therapist and started coaching your patients using more tools and skills that you had in your tool belt, in addition to your physical therapy education, knowledge, and experience. And then, yeah, from my perspective, it just kind of gradually evolved more towards coaching and spiritual coaching and less towards physical coaching and physical therapy.
Well, actually, right. That's one way to look at it. But I was actually doing that way before I went to the University of Santa Monica.
Doing what?
I was actually using kind of inquiry and exploring with people because I was very aware that there was something beyond everything that I was doing that was helping people get better. And so I think when I went to the University of Santa Monica, maybe I gained education and language that matched what I was already doing.
Did you just intuitively start doing what it was that you were doing 10 or 15 years ago?
No, my patients were
And it was longer than 10 or 15 years ago because you were at University of Santa Monica.
10 years. I graduated 10 years ago.
Graduated 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
So my patients over the last several years of like, I don't know, 20 years ago or 20 years ago or so would start saying things like, I want more Ellenisms.
Yeah, I've heard you say this. But I don't, what's an Ellenism?
Well, I thought it was just kind of cute, but Ellenism to me, I think was, I want more of the mind, body, soul connection. Mm-hmm. They wanted more of that. And so I would stay. So I had the luxury of creating a schedule in my healing house calls business where I could stay longer with people. So I would do everything under the physical therapy billing and that I needed to do, and then I would add an extra half hour to do the Ellenisms, to do more of the mind, body, soul work. And that looked like something different for every patient. Mm. But because I was in people's homes, I was much more attuned to what was meaningful to them by books that they had, by photographs that they had, and I could support them in getting more engaged in what was meaningful in their life.
In their real life, not their clinical experience.
Yeah.
But were there any mentors or books or teachers that connected you with your Ellenisms that you were sharing to people before USM, before University of Santa Monica? Because at this point in your life, I was like in high school, right? Pretty much. So I don't know what it is that you were doing besides trying to take care of me and make sure that I didn't kill myself.
There wasn't like there wasn't a teacher or a book. I'm really getting in touch with my inner guidance that was just always there. And I think as a physical therapist, I overrode that. I was like, I have to use my physical therapy skills and tools. That's why I went to school. And I was embarrassed. I wouldn't talk about it with my colleagues because I wouldn't talk about the human connection.
Well, I know a lot of people have developed that human connection and that spiritual awareness through their own struggles and challenges. Was that part of your journey?
I'm sure. So, I mean, when you say that, the first thing that pops in my head was, lifelong anxiety. And I was...
So I growing up, I didn't know that you had anxiety. I didn't know really. I remember my sister. I remember that word anxiety around Rachel and her struggles. I didn't know what anxiety was. Right. I didn't, all I knew was that Rachel had anxiety sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I was so good at masking and hiding my physical, mental, and emotional experiences. And I had a lot of anxiety. I was medicated for anxiety. And I built a huge toolbox of skills and tools so that I could tolerate. Like, I thought the goal was to but I felt like it was a badge of honor that I could tolerate and hold a ton of stress and tension. And, now I see how totally 100% self-created it was. But I was on this medication and I had tools and strategies and I could do,
I think a lot of people have that badge of honor. Life is really challenging and I have a lot of stress and work to do and I'm able to do it. And yeah, it sucks, but I can do it and I'm stronger and better for it. And I think it's a really heavy, it's really heavy to carry all of that.
And I don't see it that way anymore, because what used to be how high of a tolerance I can have, because of the understanding that I have of the teachings of Sydney Banks now, my tolerance for stress and anxiety is really low. And remember when one of my mentors said, why would you, said that he had a really low tolerance. I was like, why would you want a low, I want a high tolerance for stress and anxiety. It was like, my tolerance is so low now. The feeling just wakes me up and my thinking naturally shifts. And that's so beautiful. And that's what I really love sharing with people, is that a low tolerance for stress and anxiety and pressure and physical symptoms, for that matter, kind of is a divine tap on the shoulder to wake us up to what we're self-creating in our experience of our health.
So back to your symptoms of anxiety. When did they start in your life?
I don't know. I mean,
like as a child or
I don't remember. I don't remember feeling like I was an anxious child. But I'm really great at blocking my memories.
But definitely as a mother.
Definitely as a mother. I had a lot of pressure on myself as a mother to work, to be the best mom that I could. And, I was unsettled in my marriage with your father. And so there was a lot on me, and I was trying to manage it all. It was how much more can I do?
So in your early motherhood.
Yeah. And maybe even before. But it definitely increased as a parent.
Mm-hmm. When did something shift inside of you that because you said you were medicated for anxiety. I know that you're no longer medicated. I haven't been medicated for a long time. Anxiety. So when did something shift that allowed you to unmedicate?
Well, I had some really good therapists that I worked with, and I learned lots of tools and techniques, and so had all these tools to help me. But now I love that I don't have to use tools and techniques. I just have an understanding.
But the tools and techniques were able to get you off your anxiety medications.
I'm laughing because I got off, but I don't know that I was much less anxious. I was just...
You were able to manage it better.
Yeah, I just had this high tolerance for managing it.
Yeah.
Which often expressed itself in reaction and anger. And I mean, when I tell people the story, I'm like, sometimes my kids were embarrassed to be in public with me. or was it all the time for you?
Well, I mean, sometimes I still am, but for different reasons.
Yeah. But that reactivity part of me, it could be at anyone and everyone, grocery clerk, like anything that was like.
So reactivity in like anger, or like what's an anxious reactivity? What does that look like or feel like? Well, I don't really.
I mean, I'm
follow.
happy to explore that, but I'm not really sure that that's helpful. Like it feels so fuzzy. I feel like I would be creating something.
Yeah, I just don't really. The term reactivity for me, I think of more like in a kind of irritated, upset.
But it was
angry.
a response to my anxiety.
Yeah, just you were more on edge.
Yeah.
More on edge. Okay. So you started as a physical therapist. You drifted away from physical therapy and into...
Or incorporated the mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I never thought that I would do anything other than physical therapy. I loved it. And I didn't really realize at the time, but I had this belief that I had to like hate my career in order to do something else. Yeah. But it was a very gradual transition where there were just people would just say, I'm not interested in the physical therapy. I'm just interested in the coaching. And I said, well, then insurance doesn't pay for that. So there was some self-pay. Those were my first coaching clients. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the first one outside of that was actually the spouse of a physical therapy patient who had a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry around her husband's health and issues. Yeah.
And when did you kind of totally cut the cord with physical therapy? Was there a moment or a time, or it was just a gradual...
There wasn't a moment, because the last person that actually got referred, or one of the last patients that got referred through physical therapy, I just went out and I said, okay, this first time that we're together, there's no charge for this because I want to tell you what I'm doing. Because your doctor who referred you, he doesn't really know everything that I'm doing. And we were sitting across the table like this, and I was talking to him, and he just said, I'm totally skeptical. And I said, well, let's just get up and try. And so I taught him, shared some things about down-regulating his nervous system. And for the first time, he was someone with MS. He got his foot in the car without physically lifting it in an instant. And then after 4 sessions, we never worked on his walking or running, but after we were working on, I was really coaching him and supporting him.
But it was very much physically oriented coaching. You were coaching him around his physical...
Well, but more was really coaching him around his nervous system and the symptoms that he was having from his nervous system. And we never once worked on walking or running. And on the 5th session, I came to his house and he said, I've been waiting all week to tell you. I ran for the first time in 6 years. And I was like, that's great. Well, he said, I ran this week. And I said, well, what's so special? He said, I haven't run since my diagnosis of MS 6 years ago. I said,
yeah, you don't hear about people with MS going for a jog.
Yeah. And especially after 6 years, right? Yeah. And especially not working on leg strengthening or walk gait or anything.
Just working on their nervous system.
Yeah. And it just naturally happened. He didn't even say, I'm going to go out for a jog. He was walking his dog, and then all of a sudden he was jogging.
I've got energy and my feet are moving. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun and inspiring. And
That's pretty cool. And so, at that point you were very much using tools and techniques to support people in downregulating their nervous system. It sounds like that was your primary focus with clients. What are those tools and techniques? Or
that I was using?
Yeah.
A lot of breath. What I find is when people think about breathing exercises or using their breath to downregulate, instantly they take a deep breath in, which just stimulates the sympathetic, not the parasympathetic. It's
Right. Yeah. Well,
it's obvious.
You've got to breathe in to breathe out, but yeah.
But the focus shifts to inhalation.
Right.
And so one of the things that I did was shift people to their exhalation.
Yeah.
Finding that quiet space at the bottom of the exhalation. And then a lot of times visualization. Oh, I used to speak at MS support groups, and I would ask for someone to demonstrate and have them walk across the room. And I'd have them walk across the room and just everyone could see their limp. And then I do some guided visualization, oftentimes of like a favorite place that they used to walk when walking was easy. And I would just have them take in all the senses, like the smell, the sights, the sounds, if there was a take, like just take in all the senses, like for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they'd walk along the room and across the room, and there would be a significant change.
And everyone was able to witness
was able to witness it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So some
visualization and breath, focusing on the exhale.
And then I think I really learned to support people in what worked for them. I think I began listening more deeply to what brought relaxation to people.
Yeah, and it sounds like connecting people with their inherent relaxed state, which people can forget about. So you had all these tools and techniques and stuff, and in the last few years, I know that you are straying from any tools and techniques and focusing on the connection with.
Well, rather than strain from tools or techniques, for me, it's more of seeing what tool or technique comes up for my client in the moment. Most people have tools or techniques, and
but that's just not the focus. You don't have patients on your schedule and go with them with this
I don't have a no, I don't
that we're going to do this this and this.
So I was coaching, and actually I don't know if you know this, but in 2000, and it was either New Year's of 2010 or 2011, I think it was 2011, you were in Phoenix, and we were...
I was in Europe.
Oh, you were in Europe? New Year's?
2011, I was in Europe.
Maybe it was 2010 then.
I was finishing up undergrad.
Okay, so you were home for winter break maybe, and we went to a raw food festival. Do you remember that?
It was probably 2012 then.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll trust your memory.
I think yeah. I do remember, and I believe that was after college years. I never got into raw food in college.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe it was New Year's of 2012, and I picked up a magazine, and there was an ad for an integrative cancer clinic, and I went to the website, and I called them, and because at the time I had several people with MS and a very dear friend he had ALS. It was obvious, but because it healed and didn't progress, no doctor says he has ALS. But I saw muscle twitching. I went to the neurology appointment. I heard the neurologist say, "This looks like ALS." I saw muscle twitching in all 4 extremities at the same time. So he was interested in some integrative treatment, and a lot of my MS patients were really tired of the disease modifying drugs, or the side effects from all the medications. So I called up this place like looking for an integrative neurologist, and they said, no, we just do cancer. And I said, I don't, and I just had this like, oh, I need to be on your email list. And I actually thought like maybe, you had an interest in cancer
Yeah.
at that time, and maybe you would.
This was Oasis.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And maybe
Oasis of Healing.
Oasis
in
of
Phoenix.
Healing in Mesa, Arizona. And I thought you would maybe do some mentoring there. And when I sent an email to her, she saw spiritual psychology under my name, and she said, I've been praying for you. So I said, I'm not looking for a job. She said, but I've been praying for you. And in that moment, I heard, oh, but you have an agreement. I have an agreement with the universe that if a door opens, I'll walk through. So I said, okay. And I said to her, okay, I have an agreement with the universe to follow things that open.
When did you create that that agreement with the universe?
Probably in 2010, when I was in my 2009, 2010 in the Consciousness, Health, and Healing program at the University of Santa Monica. So I, long story shorter, I ended up began coaching their patients. Then I went to another integrative cancer clinic and learned so much, and really learned how great it was to coach things that I didn't have any experience with, because I didn't really.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, the transition, it seems like you didn't totally let go of your connection with MS and neurologic conditions, but you definitely shifted your focus.
Well, but if I had I had an agreement with the universe, the universe shifted my focus.
Yeah, you didn't shift the focus. The focus was shifted and you went with it.
Yeah.
But that is interesting that you felt more comfortable, or what was the word you said? You felt at peace or something.
No, it was just really
and working with people who didn't.
At the very beginning, it felt like I should coach what I know. I should coach what I've had experience with.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes deal with that often as a doctor myself. It's like I know a lot of doctors, like Susanna has been through chronic symptoms and chronic disease, and most people in the field, especially in the field of holistic health, have been through some symptoms or diagnosis or healing journey. And some, it's like I kind of haven't so much.
When I was coaching people that had been through divorce, what I saw was that the way I navigated divorce and the way I navigated single parenting was good for me and not necessarily good for everyone else. So learning to coach people that I had no personal or family or friend life experience with turned out to be freeing, because the language I would have now that I didn't have then was like, they have all their answers inside. They are guided by the same wisdom that everyone else is guided. So just to create a space and support them and following their wisdom rather than their insecure thinking that comes along and says, oh, I should, or oh, I shouldn't.
Right. And not having ever experienced cancer and working with a lot of people who were experiencing cancer, I would imagine you would also be able to really cultivate and maintain a really neutral perspective, and not like, I don't know, charged emotionally, like
you have to do this. Yeah.
This works. This doesn't do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was under the impression that it was important to explore the mental and psychological and emotional things that supposedly caused cancer or led to the cancer experience. Like I had some training or teaching that the disease manifested from that, but I don't see that at all anymore.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good maybe segue and shift. But before we do that, when people, because I think a lot of people do have that belief of, some chronic disease, especially something like cancer or an autoimmune diagnosis or MS or something like that. They get some idea that their mental emotional world or suppression of symptoms or trauma or whatever it may be is really the root cause of their physical.
They don't get some idea. There are thousands of books that support that idea.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that that's kind of bogus, or what?
Well, I wouldn't say it's bogus. I don't see it helpful anymore. I thought at the time it looked helpful.
So it's like trauma and mental stress and like, or, emotional suppression, whatever it may be, that may in fact cause a physical symptom, but understanding that.
Well, if it did, then our healthcare situation would be way worse than it already is. I mean, I'm thinking about people that both you and I know that live very intense, stressful lives and smoke and drink and don't get cancer. Mm-hmm. So if it was really cause and effect like that, there would be way even more people with illness. Mm-hmm. That said, thinking that I contributed to my own illness or disease feels like, well, if I heal that, then I heal the disease. And that's, I think, where the fallacy for me is. For me, the healing of disease is between soul and source. I don't see it any other way. And it feels so true for me. And if that's true, then there's nothing to fix about our past. There's nothing broken about our life experience. There's nothing damaged about us. Even with psychiatric diagnoses, even with PTSD labels, that's just a description of an aspect of a small part that people experience as a large part of how they live their life, but it's not who they are.
Mm-hmm. Back to this idea of, mental emotional issues and trauma being a source of physical disease, like the root cause of physical disease or part of a root cause of physical disease. It's acknowledging that is okay, but dwelling on that and diving in and trying to unwind and interpret and fix it is not the path
that you
see anymore.
Yeah. For me, it's like there's an electrical outlet here. It's like if I know that if there's power to that electrical outlet, why would I stick a fork in there and find out?
What's the analogy? Or
if I know that if there's an electrical feeling, a painful feeling, going back and examining trauma, why would I make that bigger?
Well, I think that there's a big understanding that reliving trauma from a place of new awareness and neutrality and making peace with the past is important and is an important part of healing.
Yeah, there is that. But I don't know that I have to go excavating in there. I mean, I've had EMDR too. I just see something different now. And what I see is that 100% of the time we impact our experience of illness and disease. And that's what I like helping people, is to see their role in their impact of the experience of pain, their experience of suffering, their experience of fatigue, their experience of disability.
Yeah, when you say their experience of their disease, what comes to mind for me is the moment to moment nature of it, because you can only. It's like I think a lot of people are focusing on their experience of their disease on like a, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly sort of basis, but that's not really how we experience anything. We experience things in the moment.
Even my clients now will go like, "Oh, I had a bad week," or "I had a bad day," and I'm like, every single moment, even of the last day?
Or even, did you really go and tally all of the good thoughts and bad thoughts, and the bad thoughts outweighed the good thoughts in that week?
Yeah. And as I see it now, as part of the human experience, we just, like one of my clients said, I'm just spring loaded to the negative.
Spring loaded to the negative.
Like
that's my
the natural,
status. That's the status
the natural
quo.
response. So yesterday I was texting someone and just had a couple questions about some logistic things, and I didn't get a text back. And then I called that person and the phone was off. And immediately I went like, something's wrong.
Well, I think we're wired and spring loaded to the negative, so to speak, in some ways as a protective measure. Like we think, oh, something's wrong. Oh, because we want to take care of things, because if there is something wrong, we want to know about it and we want to be able to correct it.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But if I just see, but as I was doing that, as I was having my human negative experience, there was also part of me that knew I was having my normal human condition experience. And so I got less wrapped up and less worried. And I was like, and more into wonder. Oh, I wonder why their phone is off. Oh, I wonder when we'll connect. I wonder if we'll meet on time. And that was so much more freedom.
And that's not how you have always been.
No, I would have fed the worry. Mm-hmm. I mean, I told your sister Rachel, like, how many times my mind has planned funerals for both of you is insane, or used to. Like, not hearing something's, mm-hmm. like literally, like planned, it was crazy, but I don't see it as crazy. I see like we do that. Mm-hmm. And then when I see that I do it, I just am less caught up by it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I don't have it anymore, but I just have it less often, less intensely, and for a shorter duration. And that is the greatest freedom from my anxiety, from my worry, from my upset that anything should be different than it is. Mm.
So how do you bring that experience in your world and with your anxiety and your thoughts? How do you bring that with your clients and, and specifically in the context of the physical disease and the physical symptoms?
Mm-hmm. No recipe, no how-to recipe. It's so, and that's kind of what I really am loving so much about my work now, is like every person and every session and every conversation is so different. I don't know. So wherever the conversation starts, mm-hmm. and just from getting curious about really teaching people the one and only way that we experience life is through thought. Mm-hmm. And when people see that something sometimes shifts.
If you were to, if someone were to approach you and ask you what you do and how you might be able to support someone in navigating their physical symptoms or disease,
I think
how would you respond to that?
So the short answer is, I teach people an understanding of how all human beings experience life. And through that understanding, people have greater ease, less suffering, less pain, and more freedom. Hmm. And it's really different with every single person. Hmm. But see, most people, I mean, I'm kind of laughing. Like I was so, when I was in that reactive time in my life, I was convinced that every person and every situation was responsible for my experience.
Yeah, and
most people do.
Yes, absolutely.
Most people have an outside-in approach to life.
And in the context of physical disease and symptoms, I know for myself, when I am in pain, like physically, like when I fall down and hurt myself, mm-hmm. like I have been doing throughout this summer, and when I'm hobbling around and limping and can't function optimally, I'm in a low mood. Like that seems to be for me, it seems pretty cause and effect. That's, I know I know that the true reality is inside out and not outside in. But for me, that the physical pain and symptoms very much seem to
They do seem
overpower
they
the
yeah.
inside out reality.
Yeah. And they do, and I always thought, not always, I recently thought that physical illness and pain was like an exception to the rule, but it's not.
So
It's,
why, yeah,
so
how and why is it not?
well, let's look at your experience, okay? Is it accurate to say that when you're hobbling around in pain and can't get back on your mountain bike that day, that every moment of that day is you're in a low mood every moment?
Well, I'll go back a couple weeks when Susanna and I were in Michigan, and I had kind of a strained foot. I got up there, I got up to Michigan, and there's these beautiful trails, and I was like, all right, I don't have my mountain bike, but I've got my shoes, and I'm going to do some good trail running. And on the second day, I kind of, stepped wrong and strained my foot. And that, I had these hopes of doing a lot of great runs, and that kind of shifted my path for the remaining 10 days or whatever up there. And I wasn't able to really walk or run intensely like I liked to. And, so I know that for me in that moment, it really came down to the attachments and expectations and hopes that I had about doing this and that, and not being able to fulfill these hopes and expectations and desires. I felt like deflated and low about it.
Can I interrupt? Mm-hmm. But when you saw that it was because you had the hope, did you see something else? Did it lessen the suffering? Let me ask, did it lessen the suffering of not being able to do what you had planned and hoped to do every day?
Yeah, it lessened it.
Okay.
It didn't dissolve it.
No.
Yeah, it
No.
lessened it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's what this understanding, it just lessens our suffering. It doesn't take it away.
And maybe that's where I'm at with my understanding, is that lessened suffering sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes I want dissolved suffering.
Right. Well, here we are back at the human condition, but in that lessened suffering, I mean, I just have little bits and pieces of your story of that time, but then you found another. Yeah,
we were,
Then you spent more time on a boat.
Then we were doing more rowboats and kayaks and, puzzles and lower.
But I think that if you had
stuff.
stayed, if you had been very attached to, I'm supposed to walk in,
Well, it was like a day of woe is me, this sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it shifted because our experience always shifts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the more we have that remembering that our experience is transitory and temporary and always shifts, then even in the midst of the pain and suffering, knowing that it's temporary seems for me and my clients to have less. It has me less, and I have it more. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, just the this too shall pass understanding, in addition to the understanding of.
But it passes because it passes not just because we have a saying, this too shall pass. It passes because the nature of thought is that we have 80 to 90,000 of them a day. Mm. And we're the only ones that press repeat. I hope I can't do this. I can't do that.
Well, on that note, the 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day, and the 90% or whatever of which are unconscious, and we are pressing repeat. But do you think that we actually are consciously pressing repeat?
No.
So how?
I mean, sometimes it feels like I'm pressing repeat, but yeah.
So if we have 90,000 thoughts a day and 90% of them are unconscious, is the intention to just be more conscious of our thoughts? Is that kind of
Right. So
the
in most
yeah.
self-improvement and spiritual teachings, it is let's be more conscious, let's be more present. But what I love about this understanding is that instead of striving to be more of what I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I have more peace and more freedom knowing that that's how it goes. 95% of the time I'm operating from unconscious, and then rather than trying to fix all those unconscious things, and I did a lot of work to fix them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that that wasn't helpful, but knowing that there's nothing to fix about the human condition is the greatest freedom I've ever had.
Yeah, so it sounds like back to this 90,000 thoughts a day and 90% of them unconscious. You're not really changing that. The goal, if there were one, is not to change the 90,000 thoughts or to change the 90% unconscious thoughts, but to just not add any additional unnecessary garbage into the 90,000 thoughts.
But we do that too. I'm just
Yeah.
chuckling because what if there was no goal other than just when I remember that sometimes I add, oh yeah, I just added. Oh yeah, I just layered.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's we add, we layer, and then
And then we have that experience.
and then we don't need to do any more,
Well,
unless we do. And
at
then
at some point we stop layering.
Yeah.
At some point we stop layering. But what if that wasn't something that needed to be improved?
Yeah, then we would be improving. That's kind of the ironic thing. If we didn't need to improve, then we would be improving.
Well, that's the experience of life that I'm having.
Yeah,
Less
that's
effort, less suffering.
To me, it's
more
just
freedom.
a universal principle. The less you try, the easier it is. And the more you let go, the more you receive.
And we have this human part that loves more and push and effort and thinks that that's where it is. And listen, when I learned that I had a loving, divine, authentic self, I wasn't even aware. But now I look back and see, like, I had such a preference to be over here in my loving, divine, authentic self, and such resistance to moments of my humanity. But the teaching of Sydney Banks and the three principles has really opened me up to the full range of the human experience. And in that full range, I just had powerful experiences around birth and death just this past year. Losing my dad and witnessing Rachel have a baby. Like, I had a deeper experience of the fullness of life than I ever had before. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. Let's pull it back to health, because that's what I really like.
That's where I was.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, like how does it all weave back to the physical symptoms? Because I know. I actually, maybe I don't know like what your client demographic is, but I know that you do have an interest in supporting people navigating their experience in physical symptoms and disease. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how does this insight-based understanding of reality shift the experience of disease? In your experience?
Yeah. So last summer I was working with someone who had, she was like 10 years or so into a breast cancer diagnosis. And she was just using integrative techniques. And we had been working together over a few months, and she went from Arizona back to the East Coast to sell everything she had so she could raise money to purchase more integrative treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. And she went back there and she said, this is the busiest and most stressful time in my life, but because of my understanding, I am having joy. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
My interpretation of that is, from the outside, this is really busy and chaotic, but on the inside, it's not.
Well, she just had joy was still possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the focus would have been on how stressful and busy and chaotic it was. But because she understood that how the human experience was created. And then, 6 weeks later, she called me up and she said, I just got my test results back and my cancer markers are worse than they ever were when I started this round of treatment. And this, like everything was looking bad from a lab, from medical perspective in labs. And she said, Ellen, I went into shock. Well, we would all go into shock, right? But then she said the shock passed and the joy was present. And so just the fact, like she was having a full experience of life. And that's just beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, that's my philosophy with, I guess you could say emotional wellness is having the ability to be shocked and be joyful and grieve and all of the things without getting stuck. And and that's part of it too. Being stuck is part of it.
We feel stuck, but knowing that stuckness is also temporary,
and
joy is temporary. And
I guess that leads me, like, a question is bubbling up. If like I was just saying, the emotional well-being is having the ability to experience all of the emotions and not get maybe too stuck in any one of them unnecessarily. But that being said, as I was saying that, I know that being stuck personally, I know what being stuck is very well. And I wouldn't say that, I would say that I still have emotional well-being. And so what like what's the line between like somebody who like needs help and someone who doesn't, in terms of their emotional well-being? And
yeah, I don't think anyone needs help. I mean, people have insights and wisdom bubbling up on their own. Just the work that I do can support people in having a deeper understanding of how it works. And I know also, like a lot of people with chronic illness or with cancer that are aware that stress kind of shuts down or impedes the immune system. Like they are so
like, oh my gosh, I can't be stressed.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't be stressed.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so before I would do that, I would like, okay, how can I help you to not be stressed? What tools and techniques can I help you to?
Yeah. In a stressful way.
I probably wasn't like that. I think I'm just responding like that. I was like, okay, well, but they were so adverse to having that, where now people like ride the wave of the human emotion, and then the stress waves through. The fear waves through. The fear is just another divine tap on the shoulder. Yeah. Oh, I'm thinking worried thoughts. I don't even, we can't change our thinking.
Yeah, I know.
I know, but most people, I used to think that I could. I used to think that if I just, and sometimes people think, well, if I just have positive thoughts, then, but since we can't change it, so then we can watch it wave through.
Yeah. So that's the focus is the watching and the allowing.
Well, I would say the watching and the allowing is a byproduct of the understanding. Like, it's so funny how we want to find like a tool or
something to focus on.
Yeah, something.
But the focus is understanding.
Yeah. Understanding that I remember how life happens and I forget. I remember and I forget. And when I forget, life is really bumpy. Life is more painful. Disease. We can shift back to disease. I can talk a little bit about my experience with. So I don't even know what you know about this. I've had 3 autoimmune conditions.
No, what autoimmune I mean,
So,
I know
yeah.
thyroid
So the
and-
first one came, and this was many years ago. I don't know when, but before I knew that the body healed, like before you taught me that the body heals itself. And the doctor said, you have this and it's autoimmune and you can do this. And I just heard internally, my body heals. I didn't put the thought inside of me, I want my body to heal or my body should heal. I just heard, and all I know is I never had symptoms again. The next one, I never spoke out loud. I never told my doctor. It was so obvious what I had, but I was so afraid of the label that I wouldn't tell you, I wouldn't tell my doctor. And the third one, the doctors don't even want to, they don't have a pill for it. So they don't even want it. They're like, oh, we don't know what to do with that.
Wait, what? Are you able to give any more information? Or
Well,
you don't have to?
I just,
Like I'm just confused.
I know.
Not knowing you very well, but not knowing what the heck you're talking about right now.
Well, I think I want to leave it open,
Yeah.
not because I don't mind sharing, but because it doesn't matter. Like to me, it's
I
more
agree.
important that
Yeah.
it doesn't. They're just labels, and so the symptoms. I want to talk like so when I was a couple years ago, is hyper focused on my symptoms because if I know where they're,
I know that you were because whenever you had extreme symptoms, I got a call, and how do I make them go away now?
Yeah. And I was really focused. Like, if I know the source, then I can, make them like, oh, I'm accepting that I have this. But I just got really hyper focused, and I had a, highly respected physician, tell me that he was convinced I had PFO, a hole in my heart. And when I look back, like I had different heart rhythms, and I had different symptoms with my heart, but I never paid attention to them. But when he said that, oh my gosh, I just started paying attention to them. And then after, 2 different Holter monitors and 2 different cardiologists, and hearing that there was nothing structurally and invasive, I had an invasive procedure, hearing that there was nothing wrong. And then I saw how much I was feeding it with my thoughts. But inside I knew that it was fine. The focus shifted. And so now when those symptoms come, it's just like they come and go. They come and go.
So you're in the intensity of symptoms is less, and the frequency of symptoms
totally
is less.
Unless I start thinking about them, And it's been really interesting. They do get a little bit spurred at high altitude. And I've had times where I'm like, okay, is there something wrong? Do I need to go to the ER? And then it's like, oh, this rapid heart rate is just my body's response to the high altitude right now. And if I need to go to the ER,
exactly,
I like
you've got the wherewithal and the attunement to know exactly how and when to take care of yourself.
And sometimes in this understanding, people say that like you have to have a calm mind to make decisions. But I've had experiences that even in the crazy, busy,
there's an eye of every storm.
Yes, beautiful.
So,
I love that. The eye of every storm.
Yeah.
And yes, and that eye is the eye is constant. It's trustworthy.
Yeah.
I don't always trust it, but
and I'll just sprinkle in, just because from my perspective of your healing as well, in addition to your understanding, which always is deepening, and especially with your engagement in 3 principles stuff, and your sharing and working and coaching and teaching and learning. You've also had, profound shifts in your nutritionally,
yes,
on a whole food, plant-based diet.
But that was an internal guidance too.
Yeah.
So, one day I woke up.
Okay, so it wasn't a Ben. guidance.
Well, it was a Ben guidance, but it was for sure you guided me, but
But I think it's important to know that I wasn't
I had to know inside of me.
Just like with any other client or patient, it happens inside of them, and it's not like something that it's not a prescription that I write
and that's why I've been sustainable on it.
Yeah.
Because I wake up and I'm like, okay, start this. Okay, stop this. Okay, remove one more thing. Mm-hmm. For me, that has been much more successful than like hardcore stop, rigid restriction. Mm-hmm. Yes, and the whole food, and I'd want to say like there's no doubt that the whole food plant-based diet has helped me, but it's helped me because I've done it my way and gradually.
Yeah, it's certainly not the only thing.
And because I've been focused on health rather than focused on reversing disease.
Yeah.
As soon as I shifted my focus from reversing disease, Ben, I had tried to lose 10 pounds my whole adult life. I worked 9 months really hard in consciousness, health, and healing at the University of Santa Monica and like lost 9.5 pounds. Bam, went through menopause. It came back on. And then I just was like, I'm going to be 60. Forget it. Just let it go. Like, who cares about my body? First time, like I finally let go of that. 20 some pounds have come off.
So you let go of that thought and that
and shifted to health.
Attachment, and you shifted to health, and you had the understanding. And at that same point in time, around then at least, you also shifted your diet to a whole food plant-based diet. Is that accurate?
Yeah. But
But
if I had shifted it to get away from illness, I would have had a different experience.
Yeah, I think the point is, from my perspective, the learning is that the behavior change, like the change in behavior, change in lifestyle, change in habits, comes from a change in mindset and understanding.
Yes, and understanding how I experience life. Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. And so how much weight have you lost?
Over 20 pounds.
Yeah. Unintentionally, like
completely unintentionally.
No restriction, no food counting, no.
I mean, the restriction is only based on my health and feeling good.
Yeah, it doesn't feel restrictive.
No, in fact, last summer when I was having other symptoms, I went from oh my gosh, like I'm so healthy to oh my gosh, I've had unintentional weight loss. Maybe I'm going to get a cancer diagnosis.
Well, that's certainly, the first thing that we're trained to think about.
But that was the human mind. But I was actually laughing at my own humanness that it went there.
Yeah. I'm sure your wisdom brought you out of that thought pretty quick.
And I went through the due diligence of my health and had some tests.
Yeah. Because your wisdom guided you into that.
Yeah.
Well, Ellen, mother, so I know that you have a new website where people might be able to connect with you on. What is it again?
Healing House Calls. And that website was really created. I mean, I didn't have a website. This was it's just been a couple months. I didn't have it for many years.
Yeah, I know you had a website like a decade ago, and then you didn't for like 10 years.
But the reason why I created this mostly because I want to share something called Days of Awe. And some of these patient stories, these client stories are on there because I just want people to know what's possible. So that was cool. That's really the intention of my So
website. They're just little snippet stories of people you've worked with and shifts and transformations.
And miracles.
Days of Awe on healinghousecalls.com.
Mm-hmm. And I also offer monthly webinars, although I missed August. Mm-hmm. Grace and Ease with Pain and Disease, where it's an interactive exploration of this understanding of the principles and how we can have a different experience.
So people can learn more and sign up on your website?
Right now I'm doing that through Facebook, but as you say that, I probably need to do something and send a newsletter out once a month when I have the dates. So so they can sign up to receive newsletters, although there isn't anything regular now, but
cool.
If they're not on Facebook then.
Well, thank you for visiting me in Carbondale and having this conversation with me.
It's just unbelievable joy to share this with you.
Love you, Mom.
Love you, Ben.